What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry. We have a tremendous episode lined up for you on this Friday, taking you into your weekend with a tremendous amount of draft intel and free agency intel as well. Let's not forget, the first wave may have come and gone, but there are multiple waves following it onto the beach here. And one of those waves carried Stefon Diggs right into Foxborough. So we'll talk about him and his potential fit in New England, why he might be a better fit than you would think for Mike Vrabel's culture. We're also going to talk about Cam Robinson. What happened there? Left tackle. He was available. The Patriots were interested. We've got some insight as to what went down for the Patriots at that all-important position and why they still don't have an obvious candidate to start week one to protect Drake May's blindside. We're also going to talk mock draft. I've got a new mock draft out on NBC Sports Boston.com. To me, qualifies as the best case scenario for your New England Patriots, given what they do at number 4 overall and what they do with their second pick. Notice I didn't say second round pick. Their second pick in this mock draft is something I think you're going to find extremely enticing and very excited to share with you that we're going to start getting into our position by position best draft fits for the New England Patriots under Mike Vrabel going into 2025 for years and years and years. You so diligently have followed the prototypical Patriots series. I know, because we've talked about it on this podcast. We've been writing about it on NBCSportsBoston.com for the better part of the last decade. I actually need to go back and see when we actually started that thing. It might be 10 full years of prototypical Patriots that we tried to put together. However, as you might have noticed, there have been some changes made to the people picking the players over the course of the last couple years, and it's made it a little foggy in terms of trying to figure out exactly what they're looking for. Now, last year we knew. Elliott Wolf had final say. He was very confident in saying that to us. He still is atop the ledger when it comes to what is on paper as the person with control over the Patriots roster. And yet we know Mike Vrabel is going to have massive, massive influence over which players get picked. So much more difficult than the Bill Belichick days when the Patriots pretty clearly had standards that they were going to live by in the draft. They had trends that they were going to follow. And then under Gerard Mayo, similar but different, and we changed it last year in terms of what we were looking for our prototypical Patriots because of what we had found from that Elliott Wolf executive tree. Now we've got this amalgamation of Wolf, Cowden, Vrabel, John Stryker, all coming together to try to make the Patriots the best team they can be, not only this season, but for multiple seasons moving forward. So it becomes a little bit more difficult, but we're still going to try to do our best to parse through all of the information, parse through everything we are hearing from scouts and coaches who are scouting these players closely. And we're going to provide for you a list of the players we feel are the best fits. And we're going to start at offensive tackle because the Patriots have a very, 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 very obvious need there, my friends. And so, logical place for us to start. We've got a great list cooked up for you there. We're going to share that later in the podcast. But let's start with Stefon Diggs. So here's what we know about Stefon Diggs. Was in town to visit with the Patriots Wednesday night into Thursday. Plenty of meetings, medical check, etc. All the things you would expect for a team in need of a receiver and a receiver in need of a job would want to do when they come together in a situation like this one. And my understanding is it was a positive meeting. Now, Stefon Diggs has since left the building. There is no contract that Stefon Diggs has signed. And so if you're my friend Mark the Beetle Bertrand or anyone else out there who is just choosing to take a negative bent and listen, I get it. I know where your head and your hearts are at right now when it comes to player acquisition, especially at the receiver position for your New England Patriots. And so if you're assuming Stefon Diggs leaving without a contract means he's into the wind, he's gone forever, I don't necessarily blame you for that. But I wouldn't rule out the possibility of the Patriots signing him just yet. He is going to be 32 years old in November. He is coming off a torn ACL that he suffered at the end of October, just before Halloween. And so you're talking minimum 9 months, which would put you really right up on the precipice of training camp in terms of Diggs' potential availability for you. So if you want to sign him and you want to bring him in for the spring and you want to have him go through all the meetings and hope that he can be around for OTAs and if not practicing, doing some kind of working out, I'm thinking of Kendrick Bourne last year. Kendrick Bourne coming off a torn ACL. It was really kind of slowly working his way back, but He was around. He was available. He was here for the Alex Van Pelt era and installation and all of that. And so if you want him to do that thing, you could do that. You could also wait and just really get a better feel for how the knee's going to look the closer you get to wanting and needing Stefon Diggs in action on a football field, able to do the things you need him to do in those situations. So I wouldn't rule it out just yet. Now, I've been reaching out to folks who know Stefon Diggs, who have worked with Stefon Diggs, who have coached Stefon Diggs in the past, because I understand the trepidation that may exist for people who look at Stefon Diggs and who understand his reputation in the league as somebody who is, let's just say, not afraid to speak his mind, and wonder how that'll match up with Mike Vrabel's culture. We know culture is going to matter for Mike Vrabel. That is fact, not opinion, as my friend Mike Felger likes to say. And they do want to be careful about the types of human beings they're bringing into their building. That's going to matter to them. They're not just going to willy-nilly spend money and bring you in, even if you're going to make the team better in the near term, if you're not a fit in that regard. And I think Laremy Tunsil is a good example of that. Laremy Tunsil was available via trade, and the Patriots knew it. And the Patriots considered trading for Laremy Tunsil. They opted not to because they didn't believe he was the right kind of fit for them. Now, they could have opted in and still lost out to the Washington Commanders. But I can tell you, their opinion of Laremy Tunsil was, boy, as somebody who's going to immediately become one of our most highly paid players, as somebody who is going to be one of the faces of our team if we acquire him. He's a 5-time Pro Bowler. He is a big name. He plays a premium position. Is that who we want for our program right now? If they were a player away, if they were a left tackle away from winning a Super Bowl, I could see the Patriots doing it. I could see Mike Vrabel, culture guy Mike Vrabel, swallowing hard and saying, you know what, given where our team is right now, that's the best thing for us. We're one piece away. Let's go do this. Let's pull the trigger. Let's blow Washington and anybody else out of the water, and let's make sure we get this guy because we need him that badly to accomplish what we think we're close to accomplishing. They're not there, and they know that. And so that's why Mike Vrabel is so comfortable talking about the types of human beings that are staring back at him when he has a press conference a couple weeks ago and he's looking at Robert Spillane and Carlton Davis and Morgan Moses and Milton Williams, all considered to be real pros. That very day, Mike Vrabel said, quote, "We don't want to be reckless through this process when it comes to team building. We want to be very intentional with the people that we bring on this football team, and we'll continue to target all those needs, i.e. receiver, i.e. left tackle, that we feel like and the players that can help us." But I do want to be careful here and point out, they're not going to be completely out on anyone who's ever had a quote-unquote football character question follow them. There are levels to this, right? So even if they were out on Laremy Tunsil, they did consider it. And even if somebody like Cam Robinson, for instance, had football character questions, there's somebody on the staff who knows Cam Robinson very well, and Doug Marrone would have been coached by Doug Marrone had he come to New England. And I can tell you the Patriots were wondering about his fit here in New England under this new regime. Fit, playing style, injury, dealt with injury last year. He is getting up there a little bit in terms of his age. He's going to be 30 years old in October. So he wasn't a no-brainer signing for the Patriots. And yet, they still were intrigued enough to try to sign him. They did, I'm told, try to sign Cam Robinson. And they feel as though they let it be known that they were willing to make a more than competitive kind of offer to Cam Robinson. That's my understanding. And he chose the Houston Texans. And it's a 1-year, relatively modest, $12 million-ish kind of deal with a little bit of upside to make even more than that, according to Diana Rossini from The Athletic. And so I can't sit here and tell you exactly dollar for dollar what the Patriots offer is. Now, Robinson is not the same kind of player as, for example, a Ronnie Stanley, who you were really willing to go above and beyond in terms of overextending and maybe, quote-unquote, overpaying for a player like that because he is everything you want, Stanley was. He was plan A at left tackle for the Patriots, and he never even officially got to free agency. But you're able to make it clear to representatives just how far you're willing to go. And so Robinson certainly is not a at all costs kind of player, but he would have represented an upgrade for the Patriots at that left tackle spot, and that's why they ultimately were interested in him. To bring this back around to Stefon Diggs, football character question does not mean you're going to be completely out on the player if you're Mike Vrabel. There are levels to this. Let's bring up the DK Metcalf example. We talked about this on the Patriots Talk podcast. We talked about it on our earlier edition. I reported a couple weeks ago the Patriots didn't officially make a trade offer to the Seattle Seahawks. It never got to that point. And that's true. But they did have interest. Despite whatever football character questions, and I just saw a video that looked like it was going viral as of this morning with DK Metcalf on a podcast talking about screaming at a head coach over the headset in the middle of a game. Like, that sort of stuff, it does happen. Are you psyched about it if you're Mike Vrabel? Are you necessarily looking for that to be what your program is all about? Maybe not. But there are levels to this. And they were interested enough to be in on DK Metcalf. So no offer to the Seattle Seahawks, but my understanding is no offer to the Seattle Seahawks because they got indications from DK Metcalf that he wasn't going to sign long-term with the Patriots if they did execute that deal. And the second-round pick the Patriots would have given up, 38 overall, in that trade for DK Metcalf is better than the one that the Seattle Seahawks ended up getting from Pittsburgh. But you can't make that offer if you believe the player's not going to sign with you long-term. You can't do a one-year rental with a guy and lose a second-round pick over that. So, football character questions, did those exist? Yes. Do you wonder about how a player like DK Metcalf is going to mesh with a young quarterback the Patriots just saw from afar? And their staff that wasn't even here in New England last year, but saw from afar. What happened with Caleb Williams when he had star power in terms of receiver talent around him, and on paper, that looks great. Wow, what a great situation for your young quarterback. And it turns out, when DJ Moore and Keenan Allen ain't getting the ball, they're going to let that be known to the young quarterback. And people in Chicago have indicated to me that that hurt the young quarterback's confidence, and that might have impacted his play on the field. And so Drake May's not the same kind of person as Caleb Williams, and quite frankly, based on what I know of Drake May, I believe he would handle a receiver like a DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, name your guy, high-end guy that wants the football in a different way than Caleb Williams. I think there is a confidence within Drake May that would allow him to handle a situation like that, and he wants guys that want the ball. You don't think Drake May would love to have a supremely gifted receiver as part of his offensive huddle moving forward after what he experienced last year? So again, big picture, football character question does not equal Patriots hate the guy. Patriots can't see the guy as part of their program. It's a sliding scale. There are levels to this. And this applies to Stefon Diggs. Because over the course of his career, it's very obvious, right? He's had issues that have helped get him from Minnesota to Buffalo and then from Buffalo to Houston. I talked to one coach who worked with him in Minnesota, said, I loved him. I loved him. He was a handful, but he could play. And he understands, according to this coach, that you only can complain as a receiver unless you understand that you can produce and that you will produce with more opportunity. Not to throw these young Patriots receivers under the bus, but if you're a young Patriots receiver and you're demanding the ball, that's a little bit different than Stefon Diggs in his prime. Safe to say? We all agree on that? Okay. Spoke to someone in Houston, a Houston staffer last year, where obviously Stefon Diggs spent the 2024 season and averaged 6 catches for a shade over 60 yards per game for 8 games before tearing his ACL. Good production. Solid, and looked really good against the Patriots in the first half of the season. That was Drake May's first start. And he had a couple of very nice routes against the guy who's right over my right shoulder there, and Christian Gonzalez, one of the best corners in football. So if he can get back to that pre-torn ACL form, you'd have a real player on your hands here in New England. But the staffer in Houston, I'll bring up my story here from NBCSportsBoston.com, says this, quote, he got along with people well here. Everyone liked him. He was a good teammate, worked hard, no noticeable issues. He understood Nico, as in Nico Collins, was the guy. Now, why is Stefon Diggs a good fit for New England if we're saying, well, it worked out so well in Houston? Because Houston, slightly different situation. That name, Nico Collins, that guy's a real number one. The Patriots don't have one of those right now. And there's a chance that if Stefon Diggs came to this situation here in New England, he would look at it, even at his age, even given his injury history, and he would look at it and say, hey, looks like I'm the top dog here. Why don't we put down in pen 15 targets a game here, okay, Drake May? And if I don't get those, I'm going to let you know that I'm not happy about it. Well, I think if you're the Patriots, your work at receiver wouldn't stop if you were able to sign Stefon Diggs. And even if he did get back to that pre-torn ACL form, you're talking about more of a high-end number two than a true number one. But how could you make this situation more like that situation in Houston? There's no guarantee there. But say you're able to draft Travis Hunter at number 4 overall. Okay, then. Now you've got a top 5 pick that you're asking to play receiver who looks like he could be a special player on the offensive side of the ball with a little more refinement to his game, with a little bit more coaching, and he would get that here in New England. Todd Downing, offensive coordinator level person, widely considered a very good offensive coach, according to people that I know that have worked with him. Josh Downing, by the way, worked with Diggs in Minnesota, and so you get a little bit of a character reference there. Josh McDaniels, you know he'd be able to coach him up as well. Another character reference from Houston, Josh McDaniels' brother Ben McDaniels was the receivers coach in Houston last year. And so if you need that kind of reference, what better resource than that in terms of where Diggs' head is at and where his demanding qualities have gone over the course of time? Have they maintained? Was he as vocal as ever? Or was he maybe a little bit different than the common perception of him at this stage of his career in a situation like that one where there is a number one? I think it's safe to say if they got a bad review on Diggs from Downing or Ben McDaniels or anybody else, I think it's safe to say he probably wouldn't be in Foxborough in the first place to take a visit. Be that as it may. If you could get Travis Hunter at 4, and we'll get into why I feel like that is a real possibility for the Patriots on draft weekend this year. Now does Diggs look at it and say, okay, I understand my role. Just as it was in Houston, there's a clear number one here. Young player or not, that guy's a top 5 pick. He's the guy. In a similar fashion to in Houston where Nico was the guy. And so I'm the number 2. I'm going to be the best damn number 2 you've ever seen. I'm going to work my ass off in practice. I'm going to help teach this young kid how to run routes because I'm a technician. And it actually, I think, would be the kind of thing that Diggs might relish is the opportunity to mentor a young player and have that be part of his legacy. If you can help turn Travis Hunter into the kind of receiver that I know receivers coaches and offensive coaches in the league right now scouting him feel he could be if he reaches his ceiling and if he is able to polish his game up because there was more of a freelance element to his route running at Colorado than there are for a lot of highly drafted receivers. But if you can teach him those, I mean, he's already one of the best, if not the best consensus receiver in this year's class without some of that polish that a lot of guys do have. You add that to his game, how much better a player are you actually getting? So if Diggs can be that guy for a young kid who has real star power in his own right, Heisman Trophy, I mean, we know what Travis Hunter is in terms of his name recognition. I mean, you're going to get a lot of secondhand notoriety, secondhand plaudits if you can help see this kid through to a successful rookie season, Stefon Diggs. So that, to me, makes this a really cushy scenario. And if you can't get Travis Hunter and Diggs ends up being your de facto number one, still, to me, qualifies as a fit here in New England. Not the worst thing in the world to have a professional in that room. That was a room lacking in maturity, lacking in focus. And Diggs, say what you will about his willingness to let people know about how much he should be included in the offense. You can't argue his production over the course of the last decade. And you can't be as productive as you are. You can't be the kind of route runner that he is without working at your craft. And so if you're the Patriots, you bring him in, again, even if he is the de facto number one because you don't have anything else and you missed out on Travis Hunter in the draft and you're trying to make it work with day 2 picks and Pop Douglas and Kendrick Bourne and Jalen Polk, you're hoping that his level of professionalism and his competitive drive rubs off on the other players in that room and makes them better. You want a dog. You need alpha personalities in that room. You don't want somebody who's going to be giving Drake May such a hard time that it's suddenly in his head on third down. If I don't throw it to Diggs here, I'm about to get chewed out. That I would acknowledge. Not the greatest thing for a young quarterback. But how about a little extra compete? How about a little extra juice? How about a little more confidence in that room moving forward? I think Stefon Diggs would provide all of those things. And if he's at this place in his career where he's willing to understand that it's not always going to go his way and that maybe the offensive line isn't going to allow Drake May the time to find him on third down if he's able to cook up a cornerback and create some separation. That, to me, I think really could make him the right kind of fit for them. Even right now, as there is such a premium being put on culture. And culture adds and positive cultural influences in that locker room. I think he could be that. Especially if you're able to give him a young number one to play alongside. Let's take a quick break, freshen up the coffee. We'll be right back, and we're going to talk mock draft in a realistic scenario where the Patriots end up with that number one receiver that I know so many of you want out of Colorado. Interesting things happening out there in the draft buzz world, friends. Cam Ward is looking more and more every day like a lock to go to the Tennessee Titans at number one overall. Adam Schefter says he's feeling that way. Name your NFL insider. They are giving indications that Tennessee is leaning in the direction of taking the best quarterback in the draft, and the consensus number one is Cam Ward out of Miami. Better physical traits. Sure, Sanders might be the more accurate quarterback of the two, but in terms of taking those physical tools and plenty of accuracy himself, I mean, the guy was a Heisman finalist for a reason, and you're able to dial up those athletic traits and leverage those in a certain way. That, to me, makes him, if not a classic number one overall pick at the quarterback position, a worthy one, especially for a team that really has no answer there. In my opinion, as is the case with all three of these teams at the top of the draft board, they can't go into next season with their quarterback situations, looking the way they do right now. So if you are of the opinion that until you get a quarterback, you need to access all avenues toward getting one, they should take Cam Ward at one overall. And I'll just reference one connection that I find interesting because we know Mike Borgonzi is the new general manager in Tennessee. His assistant there is Dave Ziegler, who for 1 year ran the personnel department here. He was the head guy when Nick Caserio left in 2021. And what did the Patriots do in the first round of the draft in 2021? Sitting there in the middle of the first round, they had a not at all perfect quarterback prospect available to them in Mac Jones, and yet they still pulled the trigger because they didn't have one. And so unless the Tennessee Titans are pulling the wool over everybody's eyes, and they really truly believe in Will Levis, and if you look at and listen to and see the body language of Brian Callahan from last year, impossible to believe that they believe in Will Levis as a long-term starting quarterback. And you just understand what Ziegler oversaw. Not that it was his call and his call alone, but the room agreed, is how I understand it at the time. Everyone in that draft room understood they needed a quarterback, and so Mac Jones was worthy of taking at that point in the draft. Bill Belichick included. No matter what people said, Bill never wanted him. Bill never wanted him. Bill wanted him. Was he dying to have him? No, I think if he was dying to have him, you would have traded up for him. But he understood where they were at. He understood where he had left them post Tom Brady in terms of just not having an answer there. And they needed a guy. And so Ziegler, Elliott Wolf, who was there, Matt Groh, who was there, Bill Belichick, everybody understood that was the direction they were going to go. And no, it wasn't because of anything ownership told them to do. That's my understanding of it. So Ziegler's there in Tennessee. Cam Ward maybe comes off the board at 1 overall, even if he's not a perfect prospect. Better prospect than Mac Jones in all likelihood. Not the same kind of processor, not the same level of accuracy. Let's remember what Mac Jones was coming out of college. But the physical skills speak much more to a high first-round pick than the physical skills we saw from Mac Jones. Those are what they are. We know that. So, in my mock, Cam Ward to the Tennessee Titans at number 1 overall. Abdul Carter goes to the Browns at number 2. Now, let's talk a little bit more about what's going to happen in the top 3 here, guys, because we know this matters so much to the Patriots and how things might fall for them. I thought Todd McShay wrote a really interesting piece for The Ringer recently talking about the reasons why Cleveland would be interested in Shedeur Sanders at number 2. Now, there are going to be teams that look at Shedeur Sanders and they don't see him as a first-round pick. Again, because of the physical skill set. He's not blazing fast. He does not have a cannon for an arm. He's accurate and he's tough. And I think those are 2 really good places to start. I want to be clear. I think Shedeur Sanders is a first-round quarterback. Is he the kind of guy you take at number 2 overall? Well, it depends on your circumstances. What are the circumstances in Cleveland? The circumstances are, if you don't get a quarterback and start winning some games there, your asses are on the line. Whether you're Andrew Berry, the general manager, or you're Kevin Stefanski, the head coach. And I thought the points that McShay made about Stefanski's success with less than tremendously physically gifted quarterbacks in the past is a really good one. The years he's had that haven't been good are because he's been bitten by the debacle of a situation that is Deshaun Watson. But Kevin Stefanski, the reason he got the head job in Cleveland to begin with was Kirk Cousins. You can make it work with Kirk Cousins. You can't make it work with Shedeur Sanders' physical skill set. I'm sorry, but Kirk Cousins ain't that guy. Why can't Shedeur Sanders be his version of Kirk Cousins? And would you be willing to spend the number 2 overall pick on that? And I think that's the question. But if your jobs are on the line and you feel like you've got a pretty good roster, good enough to compete, and you just made Myles Garrett the highest paid player on the defensive side of the ball, really non-quarterback in NFL history at the time, you feel as though you're close to something there. Myles Garrett ain't getting any younger. This would be the time to strike, and you can't do it with a highly paid quarterback either because you're just so over-leveraged salary-wise with the money that you've given to Deshaun Watson. You got to do it with a young guy. And you're probably not finding that young guy in the 2nd round. Probably not finding him in the 3rd round. Like, they caught fire a couple years ago with Joe Flacco, but that's not an option either. So do they look at Shedeur Sanders as Stefanski's version of Kirk Cousins? Could they pull that off and make it work? If they do, if you're a Patriots fan and you see quarterbacks go off 1-2 at the top of the draft, you're having a party. You're popping champagne. You're funneling beers. You're doing whatever you do on the Thursday night of the draft when the Patriots have a top 5 pick. And if you're listening to this podcast, you haven't seen that very often. But you saw it last year, and they got the quarterback of the future. That's what I believe. That's what they believe. This year, if quarterbacks go 1-2, you're getting either a premier pass rusher, which you could use, or a future number one receiver, which they desperately need. And I know Travis Hunter could play corner. You already have Carlton Davis and Christian Gonzalez. Right now, you need the receiver. Even if you want to do what my buddy Albert Breer has suggested, which is just play him at receiver for now until he either fails there or a need at the cornerback position really arises and you could really use him there. But you got to have him focus on offense if you're the Patriots and he falls to you. And so in this particular mock draft, I have Abdul Carter going to the Browns at number 2. If the Browns end up with Russell Wilson and they really don't love Shedeur Sanders, could they make that work? Maybe they could make the argument to themselves that they could take Abdul Carter and you have Carter and Garrett together, and that is a nasty pairing, and maybe you're going to just try to win games 13-10 all year. But that's the scenario in this mock, even though I believe there is a chance that Cleveland could take Shedeur Sanders at 2. So Titans go Ward, Browns go Carter, Giants go Sanders in my mock. Now, the Giants would do this for similar reasons to the Browns. Brian Daboll, Joe Shane, they're gone if they don't start winning games, and they're not winning games with Tommy DeVito, who's the only quarterback on their roster right now. So I think there's a really good chance Shedeur Sanders ends up going in the top 3 picks, just based on need alone for those two teams that come after the Tennessee Titans. Now, if Cleveland signs Russell Wilson, if the Giants sign Aaron Rodgers, can they bypass the position, make the argument to themselves that that's the right thing to do? I guess they could. And so that's what you have to be rooting against if you're a Patriots fan right now. You're dying for Rodgers to go to Pittsburgh or Minnesota, if that's still in play. And you're dying for Russell Wilson to be such a toxic, can we use that word? Might not be totally apt. But let's just put it this way. People aren't clamoring for his services right now. I think that's safe to say. And maybe you've got to hope that he doesn't love any of the offers he's getting until after draft weekend. You would love it if you're a Patriots fan. If the Browns go into the week of the draft with the quarterbacks they have and the Giants do the same. Because then you might be able to get yourself a Travis Hunter. Now, to me, when we're talking about Travis Hunter, again, we're talking about an offensive player who is relatively raw in terms of his route running, but somebody that I've been told Josh McDaniels would figure out a way to make him very, very useful very, very early in his career. We know Josh McDaniels likes route runners, and so there would be some coaching involved there. But Josh McDaniels isn't Tom Brady, is the way it was explained to me. Tom Brady was incredibly demanding and incredibly fine in terms of the detail that he needed from his pass catchers. It's why certain guys just didn't work out here in New England, whose talent would have suggested that they could have worked out. But if you were supposed to run that hitch at 8 yards and you ran it at 8.5 or 9, Brady might not throw you the ball for 3 weeks. Josh McDaniels isn't going to be to that level with a player like Hunter. He would understand what kind of weapon the kid is, and he would figure out a way to use him. The ceiling is immense. Immensely high. Maybe that's a better way to say it. With Hunter. Because of that rawness. And the comps that I've gotten on Hunter at the receiver spot are Devontae Smith, Garrett Wilson. Now, these guys are obviously thin, but they're good athletes. Their ball skills are tremendous. Now, I'm not sure if Hunter's going to have the top-end speed of somebody like a Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson ran a 4.38. Okay, that's 90th percentile of receivers at the combine over the course of the last 20 years, according to mockdraftable.com. But his ball skills are so next level, according to coaches that I've spoken to, that he already projects as a number one receiver. And for some, the ball skills are what got Devontae Smith, or in part what got Devontae Smith drafted where he was drafted. Now, he was also a route runner extraordinaire. But he's not thought to be a burner. He's really not. It's not how he wins at the NFL level. But his frame It hasn't hindered him from being a really productive player, and nor has his explosiveness. I think you're getting a bigger guy. You're getting somebody who's essentially 20 pounds heavier at the same height than Devontae Smith. So even if you think of Travis Hunter as thin, he is nowhere close to Devontae Smith in that regard. He's more Garrett Wilson in terms of that kind of frame. But then you're getting those same kinds of ball skills. And then if you can teach him what you need to teach him in order to better create a little bit of the separation and better leverage the athleticism that he does have, he's a tremendous athlete, obviously. Two-way guy to play the way he did at such a high level. I mean, it goes beyond outstanding conditioning to be able to do that. You have to be a genetic freak and an athletic freak to be able to pull that off. And so I just wonder what kind of juice might you see from a player like that? Again, as well-conditioned as he is, there's no way that your effort and your energy that's expended on one side of the ball doesn't impact you on the other. So what if he were to focus on the offensive side and not the defensive side as a pro? How much juice would he have? How much more speed? How much more explosive might he look on that side of the ball? To me, there's just so much unknown, and it's almost all skewing to the positive of, well, what if? What if that time gets allotted on one side of the ball? What if he gets the kind of coaching he needs? There's not a lot of downside there, in my opinion. Now, the downside would be, well, he just never learns the route running stuff because he didn't do it in college. You invest a top 5 overall pick on the guy, and the guy clearly is committed to football. Again, you can't do what he did without being that kind of individual and having that kind of work ethic. To me, it's really hard to envision a scenario where if he is asked to focus on it, and he does focus on it, he's not going to get significantly better at it when it comes to things like the finer points of playing the receiver position. Now, you might be out there wondering, and it's probably the minority of you, but you might be out there wondering, well, why would they take a receiver who's a little bit raw, who hasn't ever focused exclusively at that position, and might not have the top-end speed of a Garrett Wilson? Why would they do that when they have such a glaring need at left tackle? Mike Vrabel's going to want to run the ball. They got to protect their young quarterback. Yeah, he needs receivers, but first and foremost, you got to protect him because who's he throwing to if he's on his back? Why aren't they taking an offensive lineman there at 4? Or why don't they trade out for somebody who really does want Travis Hunter? And then you can get your offensive lineman a little bit later. I think these are all valid arguments. But I would point to 2 things as being the reasons why, in my opinion, they should go with Hunter over Campbell if they're in the situation like the one I painted in my mock. Number one, I think the grade on Hunter is just going to be so far and away, and I don't want to overstate it, but I think it's going to be degrees better from Campbell's, where for the people sitting in the draft room, all the scouting work that you put into a player like that, or you put into all of these players, especially the guys that are going to be taken in the top half of the first round, the grade might make the decision for you at the end of the day, because the difference might be such that you just can't ignore it. Everyone I've spoken to tells me there are 2 blue chip players in this draft, and it's Hunter and Carter. And Campbell, as much as people love him, and I know there are people in New England at One Patriot Place who love him, and they love the person, and they love the demeanor, and the character, the football character. There are those words again. But if you have a shot at a blue chip guy and you pass him up to get a tackle that I personally, the host of this podcast, personally feels will be able to play the left tackle position and play it at a solid level at the NFL. Even if I believe that, I don't think you can pass on the blue chip player to take a quote-unquote red chip player who might be good and might play a premium position, might protect your quarterback, but just won't make the same level of impact as somebody like a Hunter. So here's what you do. And we've laid it out in our mock on NBCSportsBoston.com. You're looking hard at offensive tackles with that second pick Maybe not necessarily the second round pick. You could at 38 overall. But if you've identified a tackle that's going to be in a second half of the first round kind of range, maybe all the way into the early part of the second round kind of range, to me, you have to get aggressive to get your favorite one. That means trading assets, but it's that important. Okay, you passed on the tackle to make sure you got the playmaker at 4. Mazel tov. I applaud you. That's what you should have done, in my opinion. But now you got to work like hell to make sure you get that left tackle spot secured to a degree, to the extent that you can, late in the first round or early in the second. And so in this mock, we have the Patriots trading all the way up from number 38 to number 24 with the Minnesota Vikings. Now, why was that spot important at the time that I put the mock draft together? Well, 24 puts you one spot ahead of the Houston Texans, who, when I put this together, were also looking for a left tackle. Now, they've signed Cam Robinson. He's a Band-Aid. He's a stopgap. He ain't the long-term solution at left tackle for Nick Caserio and the Houston Texans. So they still might be looking for a left tackle, especially at that point in the draft. It's late in the first round. We know this isn't the strongest draft in the world. They're closer to contention than the Patriots are, and so they're looking for immediate contributors to a degree. But if they have somebody they think is the future at left tackle, and they have Cam Robinson as somebody who's just going to bridge from 2025 to 2026 to get that left tackle ready, say it's Josh Simmons from Ohio State, who's coming off an injury. Say he's available. Now, he's not in this situation. I have him going to the Packers, believe it or not, at number 23. Packers have a couple young tackles. They're actually going to come up for new contracts right at the same time. They've got to figure that out. Are they going to be able to pay both? They really, boy, the tackles are a great example of a team that has hit on something other than a first-round tackle, and they did it twice. Great job by their front office to be able to get those spots filled. But the Patriots trade up from 38 to 24 with Minnesota, and they draft Josh Conerly Jr. out of Oregon. 6'4", 315 pounds, 33.5-inch arms, and a tremendous athlete. Explosive out of his stance. Had the best 10-yard split on his 40-yard dash of any offensive lineman at the Combine. 1.70. That is elite for a player at this position. So how do you get there? You trade 38, obviously, and you trade that number 77 pick that you got from Atlanta when you sent Matthew Judon to the Falcons back in the summer. You sprinkle in a late day 3 or a future day 3 pick, and according to the Jimmy Johnson chart, and I know some people hate the Jimmy Johnson chart, but I've been told the Jimmy Johnson chart's still in use. And so until somebody disabuses me of that notion, or we find out that there's another chart out there that everybody uses, because Bill Belichick has suggested that everybody is working off the same sheet of music here when it comes to these draft day trades, until I find out it's not the Jimmy Johnson chart and we get our hands on that thing, I'm going to roll with what the old Cowboys head coach had thrown together at one point in time. That should be enough. That's about what you're talking about to get from the 30s into the mid-20s. Even if it's a little more, guys, give him a little bit more. If you think Conerly can be your left tackle of the future and of the right now. And I think he can be. I know he has some qualities to his game that might indicate he's a little bit of a project. He's a really young player still. He's going to be 21 at the time of the draft. But he had himself a good Senior Bowl. He had one viral moment that was not so good, where he was actually at right tackle, so he was out of position. He's going against Mike Green, who's one of the best edge rushers in this year's class out of Marshall, and Green forklifted him and sent him to the 7th layer bell. Not great in the internet age. I get it. Not what you're looking for from somebody you're going to spend a first-round pick on if you're the New England Patriots in this spot. But he's a good player, and he had a good week at the Senior Bowl, and he had a great day against Abdul Carter last year when Oregon played Penn State. 0 pressures allowed. So this guy's athletic. He's long for the people who care about the arm length. You know where I stand on that, based on some of the things that I've heard from the great Dante Scarnecchia. But that, to me, is the kind of move you should be willing to make if you're as desperate for left tackle help as the Patriots are. Now, on the board at that spot, you still had Gray Zabel, Patriots could use an interior lineman. You could even argue they could still use a center. I know they just got Garrett Bradbury, but again, not a long-term solution at that position by any stretch, in my opinion. Colston Loveland goes to the Rams at 26. Nick Skirton goes to the Ravens, the edge defender out of Texas A&M. Loveland is the tight end out of Michigan. Really, really good player. He probably actually is going to go earlier than that, but that's where he landed in this mock. Derek Harmon, another Oregon Duck, a defensive tackle, goes to the Lions at 28. Amarian Hampton goes to the Commanders at 29. The running back out of North Carolina, Drake May's old teammate, really good player. The Bills take Will Johnson. They stop his slide. The corner out of Michigan goes all the way to 30 at the Bills. He's coming off an injury. Questions about his speed. Did not have a great year when he was on the field last year. So he falls to later in the first round. Luther Burden might be the steal of the draft. I actually really like Luther Burden. I think he's a guy whose situation at Missouri, the offense, the quarterback play, all of those things limited him in his numbers. It is a dependent position, that receiver spot is. But this guy has real juice. 4'4", 240. He's 6 feet, 206 pounds. I think he's going to be a weapon and a yards after the catch kind of weapon. Even if he is sort of a glorified gadget guy, at least to start his NFL career, I love the idea of Luther Burden in Kansas City next year. And then the Eagles, all they do is stack up talent on the trenches. They take Donovan Jackson, the offensive lineman out of Ohio State. Is he a guard? Is he a tackle? I would start him at tackle. He played left tackle last year when Josh Simmons got hurt, and he was damn good. Why wouldn't you try him there? And then if it doesn't work, same deal with Campbell. If it doesn't work, you kick him inside. As we're recording this, breaking news, Aaron Rodgers is at the Steelers facility. A deal with the team could be forthcoming, according to Jerry Dulac from Pittsburgh, longtime Steelers reporter there. So we could have some Aaron Rodgers news, friends. And again, and Jerry works for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. This is great news for you. If Aaron Rodgers signs with the Steelers, great news. It means he's not going to the Giants. It means the Giants, as of today, still have a glaring quarterback need. Is that the spot for Shedeur Sanders? Is it number 2 to Cleveland? You don't care. You just want him going to one of those teams so that you can get a blue chip player. How about that? Little breaking news in the middle of the podcast. Let's take another quick break here, and then we're going to get to our offensive tackle fits. We're going to rifle through those real quickly. There is a reason I'm wearing my BC High football jacket today. You'll find out why coming up next. All right, here are our thoughts on the best fits for the New England Patriots at tackle. Obviously, the need is still there, and I'm going to give you some day 1 names. We're going to split this up. Day 1, day 2, day 3. That's how we're going to handle it across positions. So when we do receivers, day 1, day 2, day 3 guys. Running backs we'll get to, day 1, day 2, day 3. Guards, edge players, defensive tackles, safeties. We're going to hit them all. The only one we might not hit is quarterback, but even there, I feel like we should at least give you some potential day 3 fits. Because if the Patriots want to do this thing where they draft a quarterback every year, like the old Packers used to do, and really still in some ways are adhering to that theory that that's a good idea on draft weekend, maybe we should give you some names there. But that's how we'll handle it here with the offensive tackles. And I'm starting with Will Campbell, because when we look at what the Patriots are going to want at tackle, to me, there are a couple of clear standards that their left tackle is going to have to hit, especially if it's an early drafted kind of player, day 1, day 2 guy. First, let's look at what Mike Vrabel has had in the past at that position. Now, he does not have anywhere near the track record, obviously, in the draft that a Bill Belichick had. And we could even debate back and forth just how much say Mike Vrabel even had over the draft picks that were made in Tennessee. And some of the personnel decisions made in Tennessee are the reason why Tennessee has had so much turnover over the course of the last several years. John Robinson out as GM, Rand Carthon in, Mike Vrabel out as head coach, Brian Callahan in. So, like, where things start and stop, begin and end in terms of Mike Vrabel's say and his power over the draft is a little unclear. Let's be upfront about that. But there have been 3 first and second round tackles that were taken by the Titans with Vrabel as head coach. He had Isaiah Wilson, one of the biggest first round busts in recent memory, who was taken in the 20s, but was considered to be really a freaky kind of mover. Now, he didn't have an amazing relative athletic score, and that's something we're going to continue to refer to this year. Before the draft, Kent Lee Platt puts that together. If you want to learn more about RAS, and we're going to refer to it that way for a long, long time here, it's going to feel like we've got about a month before the draft, but relative athletic score is basically a 0 to 10 evaluation of where you sit relative to other players at your position over a lengthy period of time, last several decades. Height, weight, speed, it all gets factored together, and Kent Lee Platt spits out a score, the relative athletic score, for every player. Anything over an 8, an 8.0 is considered elite. And when you see the RAS cards on social media, if you're somebody who sees those, that's a green score, right? That's what we're looking for here, because that's what Mike Vrabel has generally speaking invested in. Isaiah Wilson is somewhat of an outlier. Massive, massive human being. Didn't have an elite score, but had a 7.29, which is a solid score. He also drafted Peter Skoronski, who was a much better tester. His RAS was 8.89, and Dylan Radins was a second-round pick at tackle out of North Dakota State. He had a 9.28 RAS. Now, Skoronski's playing guard for them now. So let's factor that in as we factor in what the Patriots might be looking for. It ain't length. Peter Skoronski's arms are even shorter than Will Campbell's, and they took him in the first half of the first round. That's a front office that's working for its head coach. They're trying to give the head coach what he needs to be able to perform on the football field. So Mike Vrabel was I think it's safe to say, was a Peter Skoronski fan. They wouldn't have taken him in the top half of the first round if they weren't. And at the time he was drafted, what you heard was, well, tackle, guard, we know he's a good player. We'll see how it works out. He very quickly became a guard, and a guard only for the Titans. I mean, I guess we'll see as his career progresses. We just saw Joe Thuney play tackle for the better part of a season here late into his career. So never say never with Peter Skoronski, but he looks like a guard. This is just something we need to keep in mind as the Will Campbell option is out there for us, because Will Campbell's an elite tester. Will Campbell has short arms. Will Campbell played tackle at the SEC level, not at Northwestern. Northwestern sees some great competition as well. SEC is a little bit different. And Will Campbell's arms are longer than Peter Skoronski's. I'm still going to hold to Will Campbell has arms that are 32 and 7/8 inches, not 32 and 5/8. Everybody was short at the combine. So my guess is Campbell's going to go to his pro day at LSU, and his arms are suddenly going to measure a little bit longer because there's some human error involved here. There's somebody with the tape measure measuring these guys at the combine. And so he starts his measurements in a certain place, and everybody who had measurements on the books came in shorter than expected in terms of their arm length and their wingspan. It is what it is. I'm not saying Campbell has long arms. I'm just saying even at 32 and 5/8, you're talking about less than half an inch is what really matters to people. If he had 33, I don't think people would care. But at 32 and 7/8, now you're talking about an eighth of an inch. Like, let's just use our heads here, people. If he's a good player in the SEC and you think he'll be good in the NFL, you should let him play tackle in the NFL. You shouldn't just see a number on a board and say, nope, sorry, and cross him off the list, because historically speaking, I'm not sure, quite frankly, we maybe need some data on this. I'm not sure how many 6'6" guys are out there with 32 plus inch arms, sub 33 inch arms, call it. I just think I don't know how many human beings exist like that. So I know there haven't been any, according to what you hear on the radio, nobody's ever played the position. I don't know. I can think of two guys in Indianapolis right now who have sub 33 inch arms that are both playing tackle and are pretty good. Bernard Ryman and Braden Smith, both of them, short arms. They're fine. Penei Sewell's just a shade over 33. He has short arms. He's maybe the best tackle in the league. So, I don't know. Let's just consider the context. Let's consider what's working other places. Be that as it may, you're looking for good athletes. Those are good RAS scores. Isaiah Wilson, not as good, but was just considered kind of a next-level physical freak because of his size and his movement ability. Similarly, Wolf and people from the Wolf executive tree, they want good athletes. They averaged, and we did this last year for prototypical Patriots, they averaged their first and second round tackles that were taken, and we're talking about everybody from Ron Wolf to Elliott Wolf to John Dorsey. Elliott Wolf, hadn't really run a front office until the Patriots last year, but he was right-hand man to John Dorsey in Cleveland. John Dorsey was in Kansas City as well. We're talking about all the Packers general managers because they're really all off of that Ron Wolf tree. Their first and second round tackles average an RAS of 8.38, so that's elite. You're talking like 9-foot broad jumps, very good 10-yard splits on their 40-yard dashes. So elite athletes required, long arms not so much. And football character, again, of course, is going to matter to Mike Vrabel. And that's something that might pop up later, and we'll try to get even more intel on these guys. Again, we're still about a month away from the draft. We're going to do a little bit more in terms of reporting on each and every one of these guys when it comes to things like football character. I do wonder if somebody like, he's an Ohio State guy, Mike Vrabel's an Ohio State guy, and maybe there are some really good connections there. Maybe he loves Josh Simmons. Will Josh Simmons, for example, be the kind of fit Mike Vrabel's looking for to build his program around? I don't know, but we're going to try to figure out. Will Campbell, A+, A+, A+ across the board when it comes to the intangible stuff is everything you hear. And again, he has fans in the building in New England. Another day one guy, Armand Membu out of Missouri, longer than Campbell. What I've been told, higher ceiling than Campbell. Issue with Membu would be that he's a right tackle only guy, at least from what we've seen at the college level. He had a teammate who was a fourth-round pick last year, the Jacksonville Jaguars, Javon Foster, played left tackle and was sort of the incumbent left tackle there, and so they weren't going to move him off. He's an NFL guy. So Membu got stuck at right tackle. Then when Foster got drafted, they brought in a transfer from MSU, or sorry, not MSU. What is that, Michigan State? SMU, Marcus Bryant, and he took over at left tackle last season. Monster of a guy, Marcus Bryant, and Membu's just stayed on the right side. It doesn't mean he can't play left tackle. He's a great athlete. And I think he's pretty polished based on some of the things that I've heard relative to some other guys on this list. But you're making a projection there if you want to play him at left tackle. You have Morgan Moses. You need a left tackle. He might be able to do it. And maybe there are things you can do in terms of private workouts, pro day, etc., where you can get a pretty good feel for how he might look at left tackle. Maybe there's practice tape that you can get out of Missouri with Armand Membu at left tackle. Maybe he looks fantastic. I don't know. But you are making a projection there if that's what you decide to do with him. Another day one guy, Kelvin Banks Jr. out of Texas. Not as athletic in terms of RAS. Both those guys, Membu and Will Campbell, are 9.89 RAS. I mean, almost a perfect 10. It's ridiculous what they were able to do at the combine and at their size. Banks still elite. He's 8.27, so he's not quite as athletic as those other guys, but he is a really good athlete in space, you can tell. Really well balanced, under control. There's a lot to like about Kelvin Banks' game. Had a really rough performance against Jalen Walker in Georgia, but I think he's the kind of guy who, again, you might eventually say he's better off at guard. He's 6'4". He's not that behemoth left tackle prototype, but the kind of guy you would want to try at left tackle. You draft him. Say the Patriots trade out of that 4 overall pick. Say 2 quarterbacks don't go in the first 3, and they want to move out. Banks might be that middle of the first round type of guy that you might be comfortable chasing if Membu and Campbell are off the board. And I have Josh Connerly here as a day one guy too. He'll be sort of a fringe guy. I think there's a good chance he ends up at the top of day 2. Maybe the Patriots don't even have to move off of 38 to get Josh Connerly. I just would say, if that's who you want, don't leave it to chance and trade up as we did in our mock draft. But you heard about Connerly earlier. Day 2 guys, Ariante Ursary from Minnesota, mountain of a man, 6'6", 331. We've got another one of these day 2 options who fits a similar bill physically. Anthony Belton at NC State, 6'6", 336, 34-inch arms. Explosive for a guy with that kind of frame. 8'11" broad, an elite RAS score of 814. Is he a tackle? Is he a left tackle? He played left tackle at NC State. He might be a better fit at right tackle. Is he a Marcus Cannon type? I know that actually Marcus Cannon was the comp for Ariante Ursary from our guy Lance Zierlein, who you heard on the Next Pats podcast a couple of weeks ago. But that's sort of the mold that we're talking about with these guys. These are huge, huge young men. Ursary, a really good athlete, 9.36 RAS. Great 10-yard split for somebody who is just a behemoth human being. 174 10-yard split and a 9.3 broad jump. So real explosiveness there. If he has the size and the length and he's going to fit with Josh McDaniels' scheme in terms of maybe getting downhill and just hammering you over the head with that run game, Ariante Ursary is a name that you should know, with the Patriots sitting there at 38 overall and maybe needing a left tackle. I like Anthony Belton as well, and I like, hey, you want to try him at left tackle? I get it. Maybe he's a better fit at right tackle. He might be a good guard. And say there's a scenario in which you're still looking for a left tackle and a left guard going into the draft. And for some reason, Hunter and Carter are gone in the top 3, and nobody wants the 4th overall pick, and you pick Will Campbell to play left tackle for you. Okay. I might still be looking at somebody like Anthony Belton to play left guard for me on day 2, because he just looks like a mauler and the kind of physical presence that could really give your offensive line an attitude, along with a guy like Will Campbell, with a Morgan Moses. We know what Micah Onwenu can do in the run game. And Garrett Bradbury, he'd be an outlier. He would look like Mighty Mouse, maybe, alongside a handful of Avengers in that sort of situation. He's, right at 300 pounds. He's just not a massive human being for that offensive line group. But that would be a group that could really do some damage in the run game, which would be a lot of fun to watch. A couple more day 2 guys, and then we'll really quickly go through the day 3 options. I love Charles Grant from William & Mary. Was not able to test, but I think he would be one of these elite RAS testers. Really good length, almost 35-inch arms, 10-inch hands, former high school wrestler. He looks great against lower-end competition, and so I would have to acknowledge that right off the bat. But he looks like he could be a truly excellent athlete, even at the NFL level at that position. He is your quote-unquote dancing bear. He is, at least that's how it seems. And it seems as though that's how the league feels about him as well. Missed the Senior Bowl. Again, hasn't been able to test prior to the draft yet due to injury, but you might be getting a steal, almost could be a benefit to whoever gets him, because if he was able to test, I wonder if he wouldn't have numbers that would just be so eyebrow-raising that he might work his way into the early day 2, maybe late day 1 kind of conversation. So let's keep an eye out for that name for the tackle-needy Patriots, especially left tackle-needy. Some of these guys might be at right tackles, Ursary, Belton. The next name I'll bring up, and I'm wearing the BC High football jacket today for a reason. Ozzie Trapillo out of Boston College and BC High, Norwell, Mass's own, the pride of Norwell, Mass. I played for his dad, Steve Trapillo, at BC High. He was our offensive line coach. Now, luckily, I say I played for him. I just happened to be on the field while he was coaching. I wasn't an offensive lineman. You look at me, and I was a skinny little diva receiver. I think I was a $180 soaking wet as a senior in high school. But his dad was a fantastic guy, fantastic coach, played in the NFL himself. Everything you hear about Ozzie Trapillo, fantastic human being. Now, he also is 6'8" and an elite athlete himself, 8.85 RAS, almost a 9-foot broad jump, 176 10-yard split at the Combine in Indianapolis. Had himself a strong Senior Bowl. They played him at both right tackle and left tackle. Now, he played primarily right tackle at BC, but to me, maybe you try him on the left side. Or maybe if you're drafting him on day 2, you feel better about whoever you have as your starter at left tackle. Maybe you're able to figure that out again in the first round, and then you get to the early 3rd, and if Ozzie Trapillo is still there, if he's not gone and somewhere in the 2nd round, I think you got to think about taking a player like that and then feeling really good about him being your right tackle of the future. And for year 1, maybe he's your swing guy. Maybe he's your number 3. And now you've got a real young core there to grow alongside Drake May and protect your edges. But character through the roof and the connections are obvious, right? Played for Bill O'Brien last year. Bill O'Brien's one of Mike Vrabel's best friends in coaching. Doug Marrone was at the BC program last year as an assistant. Marrone, one of Bill O'Brien's best friends in coaching. But now he's the offensive line coach in New England. You think he'd have some pretty good insight into what Ozzie Trapillo might bring to the table? Additionally, Ozzie Trapillo working with our buddy, Dante Scarnecchia, prior to the draft. And so everything he is learning and hearing from Dante Scarnecchia are things that Josh McDaniels is going to believe in, because those two were so tightly connected and had such a great relationship over the course of their time here in New England together. So Ozzie Trapillo, in terms of fits, you might not get a better quote-unquote fit for the New England Patriots in 2025 than Ozzie Trapillo, and he easily fits into our day 2 category here. When it comes to day 3, guys, I really like Iowa State, and before that, Princeton's Jalen Travis, 9.91 RAS, 35-inch arms, 9.4 broad, just a tremendous athlete, and as a Princeton guy, somebody you would think has the kind of intelligence Mike Vrabel likes to see from all of his players. Kansas's Logan Brown is another name I think it's worth keeping in mind, 9.44 RAS. Alabama A&M, Carson Vinson. All right, so we got 2 smaller school guys. This is even smaller than William & Mary. But Alabama A&M, Carson Vinson, 9.44 RAS, good length, 34.5-inch arms. That's a day 3, physical specimen kind of option where, hey, on day 3, if you're looking for tackle help, especially left tackle help, you're rolling the dice. And you might as well roll the dice on somebody who's a next level kind of athlete. Now, this next player might kind of fit in the Skoronski mold, shorter arms. Maybe he's a better guard at the next level, but it's Texas Tech's Caleb Rogers. Very good athlete and somebody that I could see the Patriots being interested in. Michigan's Miles Hinton. Everything you see and hear about Miles Hinton, you like from a football character standpoint, and this guy is a monster. 6'7", 323 pounds, over 34-inch arms, over 10-inch hands. That's the kind of guy that you might be willing to bet on late in the draft. Same goes for Rutgers. Holland Pierce. Not a tremendous athlete, but the size is next level. Holland Pierce. Ready for these measurables? 6'8", 341, 36-inch arms. So if you're just looking for size and mass and anchor, 4-year starter at Rutgers, somebody that, again, late in the game, late on draft weekend, somebody you might be willing to make a bet on. Is he going to be the best athlete in the world? No. But that size, hard to come by. Can't teach it. Something that the Patriots maybe could be looking for late in the draft. Okay, this has been a marathon Next Pat's podcast. We so appreciate you sticking through to the end. We got through some mock draft. We got through some tackles. We talked some Stefon Diggs. We talked some Cam Robinson and DK Metcalf. We covered a lot of ground. Leave us any questions, comments, concerns you may have down below in the comments if you're watching us on YouTube. If you're listening to us, leave us a comment on Apple Podcasts. I promise. We just have to get out of the studio right now, but we are going to get to those questions and those comments, those 5-star ratings. We appreciate them all so very much. Keep them coming, please and thank you. We're going to talk to you again next week. We're going to have some fantastic insight into all the draft prospects you need. We're going to go through position by position. We're going to have another offensive position. We're just going to tease it that much. We're going to give you another offensive position next week. We'll have a lot of fun with that. We'll talk to you then.